Good morning, Greene County. It's everybody's favorite time of the month when you get to have a whole bunch of numbers thrown at you so fast your head just erupts. So that's what we do here today is we run through some numbers. We try and give some 30,000 foot understanding and share information with you so that hopefully you turn around and share information with us and we get the wisdom of the crowd going to where what budget office does is a little bit better than what we've done in the past, because we're always wanting to improve, and we can't improve without you guys. So we're going to hit things kind of fast and furious like we have the last couple months, where we hit our 5 items, and then we go into some additional analysis that I've spent a lot of time on to hopefully make something meaningful for you guys to hear. So just hitting it, we have our budget monitoring sheet that we put up on the budget website every week. And just to go through the top 5 revenues compared to PACE versus the top 5 expenditures compared to PACE, we'll run through those real quick. Most of these are not going to be a surprise to anybody who regularly attends these meetings. The first item is a general revenue item on revenues, and it's recorders fees. And we're estimating the recorder's fees to be about $377,000 lower than budget this next year. And again, that's just a symptom of the marketplace that we're in right now and the interest rate environment that we're in right now. It's something that's not controllable by us. And again, the recorder's office makes fees well in excess of their operations, and they contribute greatly to general revenue. This year, they're just going to be under budget. The next item we have is Sheriff Other Revenue in Fund 101. And this is behind PACE, currently about $231,000. We're projecting, and the main contributor to this is federal boarding revenue. And we're projecting federal boarding revenue to be about $2,018,000 behind budget this year. So that's a hard one for us to take. The next one we have is license and permits and other revenue in the circuit clerk's office, county clerk's office. My apologies to the circuit clerk. That one is on pace right now to be about $88,000 behind. However, fees are collected throughout the year and not in a level manner, and reimbursements for elections happen later. So we do not believe this is going to be over budget or that this will be in line with budget by the end of the year. The next item that we have is the sheriff's state revenue, and this again is grants related, and right now they're behind pace on revenues by about $43,000. But as we previously said, grant reimbursements run behind pace, and so we expect this to be within budget by the end of the year. And the last item we have on revenues is, again, with the county clerk, and it's our other revenues for the county, the intergovernmental revenues from the county clerk. They're currently about $38,000 behind pace, but we believe that will be made up by the end of the year. And so that's our revenues that we're looking at here. When we go to expenses, our first expenditure is with Road and Bridge, and they're currently $579,000 ahead of pace on operations in Road and Bridge, and this is mainly due to statutory paving contracts. At this same time last year, they were at 71.6% of budget, where right this year they're only 66.5% of budget. So we believe that this is going to correct itself and be within budget by the end of the year. The next item is sheriff personnel and general revenue, and we're currently on pace, ahead of pace by $571,000 through 7/22 or through 8/5, and we're going to talk about vacancy and salaries in the next section after this, so I'm not going to elaborate on that right now. The next item that we have is in our LEST fund, and that's commission operations. And in this one, we're currently $284,000 ahead of pace. And this is mainly because of municipal distributions of tax and our trunk radio system maintenance costs, which city utilities changed the manner and how that's billed. And we actually have savings from the previous year that's knocking out a big portion of this. And then our next item is LEST sheriff personnel. And again, we're going to talk about that. And the item after that is commissions LEST personnel, which this one's a little bit different because it not only includes pretrial, but it includes all of workers' comp. And so as workers' comp gets paid an annual amount early in the year, and so we anticipate always being ahead in this. And right now, that workers' comp budget is probably about 90%. We know we'll have a little makeup when the audit comes in, but we think we'll be okay on this item. So that really takes us to the two personnel issues. And so, Mike, if you can switch, the document we're going to put on the screen right now is the vacancy report that we put together. And we do this vacancy report after every pay period, and we put it on our website, the budget's website. So to understand this vacancy report, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this report because it's an important report for us. We need to know that this is only showing us where we are in vacancy in excess of budget. So we break vacancy up two ways. We have budgeted vacancy, and then we have vacancy in excess of budget. Budgeted vacancy is very important for us in that it represents, to a large degree, the regular amount of vacancy that we anticipate an office or department to have throughout the year. And so since there's this regular amount of vacancy, or typically caused by turnover and the timing that it takes to refill a position, since this regularly reoccurring vacancy happens, instead of having the budget take up those resources for something that we're not going to pay, we anticipate the vacancy and budget it so that those resources can be used elsewhere in the budget. To give you an impact of that, when we look at general revenue and LEST, in the 2023 budget, we have budgeted vacancy of $4,158,000. So if we didn't anticipate this turnover allowance, then there'd be $4,158,000 that we didn't get to put towards an appropriate need. So that's why budgeted vacancy is so important. One of the things that happens besides the typical and usual vacancy that happens is unexpected vacancy. And typically we have unexpected vacancy in a rather large amount in many of our offices and departments. And so that's not something we budget for, but it's something we're used to seeing. And in the past, it's built up balances that has given us excess cash that we can do spend down balances for and contribute to our next year's budget. What we see here, when you look at general revenue, these are our offices and the amounts of excess vacancy in excess of budget. So what we see here is courts and juvenile have had 50,249 in general revenue in excess vacancy this year. And we go down through the list. County clerk has had 44,000. The public prosecuting attorney, $197,000 worth of excess vacancy, more than the planned vacancy, the budgeted vacancy. And then that takes us obviously to what we see here. The sheriff's office has red here, which this indicates that the sheriff's office not only doesn't have any excess vacancy, but that spending is spending down into their budgeted vacancy. So the sheriff's office, out of necessity, has had to spend $647,000 into their budgeted vacancy to operate the jail in a safe and sound manner, and $257,000 in LEST. So for a total of $905,000 of spending down into budgeted vacancy to operate the jail in a safe and sound manner. And what this means is there's $904,000 of budgeted vacancy that we spent on other needs, but this $904,000 in the sheriff's office is taking away from those needs, or well, we're already spending those needs, and so this is a deficit. Fortunately for us, with general revenue, we have enough vacancy in all of the other offices that we only have a net spending of budgeted vacancy of $4,110. However, that doesn't mean that that's going to stay that way by the end of the year. We could have an office holder that has had an amount of budget allocated to them, and they have realized excess budgeted vacancy that they would be allowed to pay some of their own overtime on. So, for instance, the county clerk has $44,917,000 in excess vacancy right now. We still have a November election. The county clerk does sometimes pay overtime when it comes to elections. So that 44,917 could go down. Or if somebody has a need, like an equipment or capital need, and they have realized vacancy savings, they can come to commission and say, you've given my office this budgeted money. I want to transfer a portion of what I have saved in my budgeted funds from personnel to equipment to buy something. And then that would be up to commission to weigh out what that department's needs are compared to what's happened in the operation of the jail. And so that's a decision that commission would have to make. And so that's kind of how we look at this. And so when you look at GR and LEST combined, right now we have a total excess vacancy of 81,409. So we're still doing good there. However, we're used to seeing at least a couple $1 million in excess vacancy. And so we're not seeing that rolling forward to the 2024 budget. To talk about how we've gotten to that $904,000 in the sheriff's office, I've kind of done some research. Now I'm going to preface this by saying, I don't know a dang thing about how to run a jail. I just know numbers. And so there's reasons that this is happening. And I'm going to try and assume some of those reasons and point those out. But just so you can see how this has happened, as you know, this is, and I've put this in comments because it's complicated and I want to make sure that I say it right to you guys. So as you know, this is the first full year of the jail, the new jail, operating the new jail, and we are projecting to be over on personnel and over on operations, even though we're only 60% occupied. What happens if occupancy increases? When the $150 million construction budget was approved for the new jail, it was based on a long-term plan that included a personnel plan based on 297 detention officers. When we did the budget this year, the sheriff had the number of detention officers increased to 317. That's up 20 from the plan. I believe this was very smart because while the jail advance team figured the number of officers needed to staff the posts and included coverage for vacation and other time, including training and other things, I don't believe they accounted for vacancy, that naturally reoccurring thing that you're going to have. So with a staff of 317, there's always going to be a certain number of positions that are vacant from turnover. The budget office looked at past vacancy and estimated a vacancy rate of 8.5% for the 2023 budget, or 27 detention officers. At August 5th, 2023, our last pay period, end date, the jail had 42 detention officer vacancies, or 13%. That doesn't leave us with enough officers to run the jail in a safe and secure manner. As you know, Commission approved an overtime policy for 2023 that allows offices and departments to pay overtime up to your level of excess vacancy. Through August 5th, we've paid a total of $1,200,000 $364,742.63 in non-grant overtime, with $1,279,618.36, or 94% of that being in the jail. That jail overtime includes the equivalent in hours of 24 detention officers, leaving an operating vacancy going from the 42 vacancy down to 18, which is forcing a vacancy turnover rate of about 5.7% versus what we have in the budget. In addition, the equivalent of 4 corporals are being paid in overtime, and there aren't any vacant positions for corporals. So that detention officer operating vacancy goes down from 18 to 14 with the addition of the corporals, and our forced vacancy turnover rate becomes 4.4%. So we're really trying to operate at a vacancy ratio of 4.4% for a safe and secure jail when we're experiencing 13% vacancy in that jail. And that's causing us to pay overtime to get us down to that 4.4% vacancy turnover rate. And we've got to remember that filling these 28 positions at time and a half is costing us the equivalent of 42 positions. So we're basically operating at the initial jail advance team level numbers +6 for the detention officers to operate the jail in a safe and secure manner with 60% occupancy. And again, I don't know what happens if occupancy increases. That's going to be out of what I can know and into what the sheriff's going to request for the 2024 budget. So filling these 28 positions with people that can do the job and will stay in the position is imperative to fixing this financial problem. And our HR department has worked with the sheriff's department extensively, and we're getting the applications and we're filling the positions, but people aren't staying in those positions. And so that's the problem we're facing. So when you hear a lot about problems across this county with hiring, a lot of times it's just not being able to get the applications. But we're getting the applications and we're filling the positions, but the positions aren't working out. And so that's creating a problem. We have 13% vacancy, and we're having to force ourselves down to a 4.4% vacancy by paying overtime, just to run a safe and sound jail. That was the thing that I wanted to spend a lot of time trying to explain to you. I hope I've done that topic justice for you guys to understand. Why don't I know I'm going to run out of time, but why don't I break right now and ask if anybody has any comments or questions about the vacancy rate in the jail or our overall vacancy numbers? Anybody? Okay. I wasn't going to wait long. So let's go to the next screen, back off of this. And this will take us to our regular Know Your Number stuff. And I'll fly through this again. But we start with Road and Bridge. I've added another column, which is that first column there, which is the initial budget. When you look at Road and Bridge, we have a change in cash that was planned in the initial budget of an increase of $3.3 million, 3.4. The far right column, our projection on where Road and Bridge is going to end is at 6.3 increase in cash. So we are doing very well with our Road and Bridge fund. They have a large number of vacancy that is probably contributing to this cash increase that I'm sure they would rather have, and our citizens would rather have the people out on the streets mowing and striping and doing the stuff that they need to be doing. It's a real challenge for them. But financially, it works out for me. The next fund is the assessment fund. You can see our initial budget there. We had a change in cash plan of $869,000 decrease. With the way that the office is being ran, that projection is much better than the initial budget of about $509,000. And of course, we know that the reason for the planned spend down is for some one-time capital improvements. And that seems to be going very well. If we can go ahead and go to the law enforcement fund, we had a planned change in cash of $802,000. And that's because we had excess cash sitting there of $802,000. So we thought we would spend that down. And the remainder of law enforcement activity to be supported by a transfer from general revenue of $382,000. When we do our projections, we've noticed that the cash balance was actually $1,064,000 instead of $802,000, so we're able to spend down more. However, with the revenues and expenditures both being over budget, but expenditures having a bigger impact, we're seeing revenues being less than expenditures by almost $2 million. And so that means that the transfer is increasing by $520,000. And so that increased transfer of $520,000 is actually a cash expense for GR. And so that takes us up to GR. In our initial budget, we had a planned spend down of $9,600,000. And that was planned with the budget. Now we have a 20-year plan where a portion of that is actually a planned spend down, and we'll get into that on the next sheet. But when we look at how we're doing, we had an adjusted budget adjustments that took us to $11 million change in cash. And our projection for the end of the year is that we're at $9.8 million. So we're actually doing a little bit worse than the initial budget by about $300,000, not quite $300,000. And you can really attribute that to the $500,000 additional transfer that we're having to support LEST with. So in most cases, even though we've had some challenges in certain areas, we've overcome those challenges with savings and other things. Let's go to the next page. So that takes us to the 20-year plan that I mentioned. So I want you guys to understand that when you see our cash balances decreasing, that's not an issue. That's not a problem unless it's more than what we planned for them to decrease. And so here, where you see GR decreasing by $9,800,000 in our projection, we budgeted a decrease of $9.6 million. And of that, almost $4 million of that was a planned decrease in our 20-year bond plan from the 2017 tax, because of the way that we've planned for our bond expenses and for how projects roll out. And then, so we see ourselves at the end of 2023 with our plan, our 20-year plan, needing a cash balance of $32,973,000. When we look at where we believe we're going to end up, we've put all this together, but we believe we're going to end up at $32,490,000. So at the end of 2023, we believe we're going to be about $484,000 short on cash in GR. And again, that's pretty close to the increased transfer figure that we need to cover LEST with. To reference another item, though, on our plan for the end of 2024, we believe we're going to need cash of $28,985,000. So you can see there is almost a $4 million planned decrease in cash for the 2024 budget also. And again, that's because of bond payments decreasing as we go. 2023 was our heaviest year with the plan. We had the highest amount of bond payments, and so those decrease every year going forward. And we have these planned spend downs happening through 2032. And at that time, our operations catch up with our cash balances, and we see those cash balances beginning to build again. And it's all part of our 20-year plan for how we spent the 2017 GR2 tax funds and how we rolled out those projects. Mike, if we can go to the next page. And, you know, we have more time than what I thought. I've really been skipping on you guys a little bit here. But this is a very good page to spend a lot of time on, because this is where we're talking about what we know now impacting our 2024 budget. And so this is purely an exercise of the budget department. Commission hasn't acted on or made any decisions related to any of this information, but this is the budget office starting the discussion, getting thoughts and input from people about where we are and where we're headed for the 2024 budget. So to kind of summarize 2023 budget, we had that planned budget spend down of $9,600,000. Of that, $3,364,000 was GR2 plan spend down, part of that $20 million plan. $6,225,000 of it was excess balances that we built up that we were able to spend on projects and other one-time items to use our resources strategically. So what we're doing for this little exercise by the budget office is we're taking a look at 2024. So if we take the same experience that we had in 2023, we see a cash spend of $9,792,643. The planned spend down for 2024 is $3,988,000. So we subtract that out. And then we have that shortfall in GR of the $484,000. Plus we have that $1,064,000 balance that we can't repeat with LES1. So that's $1,548,000 that we're looking at cash to cover so that we can be at the same 2023 operating levels. This next thing is something that the budget office put in, and we've looked at past COLA rates. And I know typically we budget a 1% COLA and a 1.5-year step, mid-year step. And that's our minimum salary increase that we try to guarantee in the budget every year for employees. Well, instead of doing the minimum, we've put a goal in here of a 5% COLA and a 1.5% mid-year step. And we believe this is the amount necessary so that employee salaries can keep up with the market and so that you don't end up going backwards on your spending power in the economy. I think commission is very favorable towards a 5% COLA, but in actuality, it's something that we're going to have to figure out whether we can afford or not, and that's why we need your help. But that's what we have in there, and that 5% COLA and 1.5% step is $3,690,000, in addition to what our 2023 spending is. This next item is the change in the sheriff vacancy. And so as I said, we have budgeted vacancy. And that budgeted vacancy represents our normal turnover. And what we had in the 2023 budget was an 8.5% vacancy rate. But we know now from sheriff operations of the new jail, which is the first year that this is happening, that we need to force ourselves to a 4.4% vacancy ratio. And so right now, that's backing off of budgeted vacancy of $1,400,000. So that if this activity has to repeat itself next year, we're not spending $1.4 million on something other than sheriff personnel. So that's $1.4 million that can't be spent somewhere else. And then we have our presidential election next year. And this is just an estimate, and that estimate is by taking what the 2020 presidential election cost was minus what our most recent budgeted years of elections is. Is the presidential election going to cost the same in 2024 that it cost in 2020? Probably not. And so that's what we're waiting for to see on September 1st when we get requests from our office holders and department heads. But all of these line adjustments mean that we need to find $13,495,000 in order to operate. And so that means either cutting back from our 2023 levels, seeking increased revenues. This is our challenge. So identifying and finding that $13,500,000. Our sales tax has taken a hit this year. We are going to have sales tax performing about 1.4% less than budget in 2023. That's for GR1, that's about $750,000. GR2, of course, is about twice that. So GR is impacted this year by that amount. However, using our model makes me very uncomfortable to do modeling like this, but we don't, it's either a gut feeling or using a model. Using a model, we see a turnaround in sales tax, a turnaround in our general economy early in 2024. And so we believe at this point, we'll know more as the budget goes along. But right now, at this point, we believe that we could have up to a 5% increase in sales tax in 2024. And of course, our numbers in 2024 run March through February. So that's $3.8 million that we're adding into the budget projections, because the last thing we want is to ask for all these cuts and end up with excess funds at the end of the year. I'm not doing my job as a budget officer unless revenues come in close to budgeted revenues and expenditures come in close to budgeted expenditures. Because if we're socking away money unintendedly, we're not giving commission the ability to make the decisions that they should make. So my job is to be as close as possible to what I believe is going to happen. As we said before, bond payments go down every year. So next year, the bond payments are $516,000 less than what they are in 2023. That'll continue to happen throughout the next 20 years. That we'll have additional savings in bond payments as we go. That was part of the structuring plan that we put together, and that's why expenditures are heavier now than they'll be in the future, because we know salaries and other costs go up. So we structured our bond payments to where bond payments were heavy at the beginning and got lighter and lighter to partially offset those operating increases. And then we have a projection of savings on mental health spending of about $500,000. So those are the three main items that we identified as changes from 2024 to 2023, or 2023 to 2024. We also looked at what we did in 2023 because, you know, as I said earlier, we spent $6,225,000 in excess funds to take care of some needs. And so we just identified some of the increased capital that's happened over time, over 2022 to 2023. So bringing capital back to 2022 levels would be a savings of about $2,284,000, and bringing operations back to 2022 levels in these areas would be a savings of about another $1 million. So in all, we've identified about $8,062,000 in changes to look at. Now, not all of these things can happen, and we know the presidential election will probably be more. The vehicle services, that $303,000 worth of vehicle purchases, we're going to have to pay that out of somewhere, and we know LEST can't do it. So there's going to have to be something that happens there also. So these numbers give us kind of a general guideline that we've identified about $8 million. But we still need to identify and look at about $5,433,000, $34,000. And to be honest with you, I don't believe we can find that much in our operations and capital. I believe we really need our office holders and department heads to look at your areas and see, what am I doing that I don't necessarily have to do? How much time does that save? Do I have the ability to perhaps freeze a position for this year? Maybe not a permanent freeze, but freeze a position for this year to help make up for this difference. And the budget office has decided not to hire our vacancy. And commission has already decided not to hire one of their vacancies that they have. But as we go further in this, you know, this is just the 30,000-foot view, and we're looking down and we're talking about what the 2024 budget is going to look like. And right now, it looks like we need to tighten our belts a lot to do the service to our community that we need to be able to do. But we also have that goal of trying to find these cuts so that we can keep our employees paid at the market rate they're currently at without backsliding because of the inflation that we're experiencing. I don't want this to come off as bad news or depressing news, what this should really come off as is the fact that we are analyzing where we are, and it gives us time to make the adjustments we need to make so that we can do our best by our citizens and do our best by our employees. So with that, I ran over. Yeah, I thought I had a lot of time for this last page. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to me. Like I said, it's just a budget office exercise. We're not saying the sky is falling. We're just saying, hey, let's get out some umbrellas and get ready. So y'all take care and have a good day, and we'll see you later.